topic of today's discussion is how to build your brand's credibility and increase trust with consumers. It's something that we wrote about in this week's issue, and to talk to us about it and give their thoughts on this and other trends about marketing during a recession, I'm really excited to introduce our panelists. So I'm going to actually let our panelists introduce themselves. And what I want you to do, David, we'll start with you. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then also to help frame where our discussion is going to go. Talk to us a little bit about what the major challenge for your brand has been this year.
Sure. My name's David Webster. I'm the General Manager of Brand and Marketing Strategy for the Microsoft Corporation. And my role is an interesting one. I oversee our portfolio of both consumer and B2B brands and get involved with positioning them, managing the architecture, driving their overall communication strategy, and then working with our agencies as they bring that to life through the creative process. And obviously a brand as large and as visible as Microsoft has many irons in the fire at any given moment. And the tricky part of, I think, my job and a lot of folks who are working in a company with a portfolio of brands is knowing how to allocate resources and focus time between that portfolio. When do we spend money against Bing? When against Xbox? What are we doing with Windows? What are we doing with Office? How can we transfer equities and preference between them? And how do we use each of them to drive a different set of values back to the corporate brand itself? And so that's what I and the team spent a lot of time with, is not just developing strategies for the individual advertising campaigns for those sub-brands, but thinking of them as a collection that each contribute to and leverage strength from the corporate Microsoft brand.
Javier, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Javier Benito. I'm the head of food innovation marketing for KFC. And I'm responsible basically for the pipeline of new products we have, as well as the traditional marketing things we do with the brand. I guess it's a little bit different in our category. The QSR category is a very competitive category. So the biggest challenge we faced this year was all related to disposable income. How do you make sure that consumers are actually spending money in your brand and making your brand the brand of choice versus the other ones in the market? And innovation was obviously one of the biggest things that we make sure we did this year to make sure that we stayed connected with consumers, and we basically drove the preferences in our way. And like David mentioned, obviously making sure you're using your resources in a very smart way, and making sure you're looking at return on investment on what you do has been critical for us.
Scott?
Great. I'm Scott Keogh, Chief Marketing Officer for Audi of America. Essentially responsible for all the products, so the product planning, the pricing, the packaging, the equipment, as well as the marketing communications, all the advertising and efforts that we do here in the U.S. market. And I think very simplistically, the biggest challenge in my industry has just been one word, and the word is optimism. And I think you can get a lot of panic in the system. Obviously, panic goes to employees, panic goes into dealerships, and eventually panic goes into customers as well. So in my role, I think it's incumbent to keep optimism into the system because if it turns the other way, you just get a whole bunch of effects that are extremely negative for the brand and for everything. So simplistically, that would be the number one thing focused on this year.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Mercer. I'm SVP of Corporate Marketing at Cisco Systems. Came to Cisco about 7 years from IBM Corporation, which is this year's #2 brand to Microsoft, so a bit of a switch there, which is nice for them. In 1994, the IBM brand, I think on Interbrand scale, was worth like minus $50 million, so I think it's come a long way up that scale. We watch the Interbrand scale very, very closely, and it's something our CEO looks at, and every time we go up in rankings on the Interbrand scale, John Chambers looks at me and say, "That's great, now I can reduce your budget," which is great. So that's one of my biggest challenges, is to internally teach people and executives at Cisco what branding means. And so often it just means, to some people, just advertising. Some people it means the new logo we created. So it's a constant education process for us to teach our inside executives what the brand means and how reputations are formed. Our second biggest challenge, if I could talk to another one, we're a company who grows through acquisitions. 130 companies since the inception of Cisco the last 25 years. 130 companies, all who came to Cisco thinking they had a great brand. And you know, some of them were product names, some of them were recognizable product names, like Linksys. The last company we just acquired, Pure Digital, is convinced that their brand Flip is a great brand too, and not just a great product. So one of our biggest challenges and why we seek out companies like Interbrand is to help us weave our way through the morass of what is a good product name, what is a good product brand, and what is a master brand. Are we a house of brands or a branded house? And that's a constant battle for us with all these new acquisitions. So
the studies we've looked at show that the consumers are more skeptical of business than they've ever been before. So when you're marketing new products, David, Bing is the search engine existed before, but it's a new brand. What sorts of things did you do to make sure that to get consumers to actually trust you, to trust Microsoft?
Sure. Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is you talk about the trust that people have to have in a corporation that's behind a product or a new brand, and I think that's a critical one. One of the key questions we, obviously faced, like any company does at some point when they're developing a new product and a new brand to go with it, is say, well, is this brand going to be endorsed by the company or is it not going to be endorsed by the company? Is it Microsoft Bing? Is it Bing by Microsoft? Is it just Bing and we pretend Microsoft has nothing to do with it? These are key questions that people have to ask themselves. And one of the things that, we're a very data-driven company. We do a lot of consumer research. We know with some precision how people feel about these things and how they feel about the brand. In our case, what was really clear is that if we were going to get people to try an alternative in this category to whatever their current choice is, which for the most part is Google, they needed to know that it was from somebody that they'd heard of. There was a moment in time at which people would probably try a search engine from any startup that they'd never heard of. But at this point, in order to even have the credibility to say, yeah, I'll give that a shot, I'll try that to drive the coverage, they needed to know it was from a company that they'd actually heard of. So that was a relatively easy one, and that we knew we needed to leverage the trust that consumers have in the Microsoft brand in order to make them willing to take a look. And when I say that, I always get an odd look sometimes from people's faces, and they say, really, consumers trust Microsoft? Because we live in a media and social networking driven environment where the loudest voices tend to not trust Microsoft or say disparaging things because we're a large target. But by and large, rank and file consumers around the world actually have an enormous amount of trust in Microsoft, use their products like Office and Windows every day, and have relied on them for decades. And so we have a fairly large reservoir of goodwill that we can tap into when we launch a new product like Bing to say, give this one a shot.
Mm-hmm. Javier, you also launched a big new product, grilled chicken, this year. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that launch and how you set about it?
It's very interesting. One of the biggest learnings we had this year, we probably had the biggest launch we ever had in the history of the brand in the middle of the economic crisis. And when I talked to Burt, I told him, look in 2020, if you had enough time to plan, maybe we would not launch the product, which would have been the wrong decision to do. Mm-hmm. But when you manage 50 to 100 restaurants, it takes a while to get the launch going. So we're already in the middle of planning for the launch. And it was the best thing we could ever do. Because what I told you before is critical. The consumers are looking for innovation. And this was a product that was going against the biggest potential barrier that we have in the category, which is the potential perception that fried chicken is not good for you. So we came with this platform, which is a healthy platform for consumers. And the response we got from people was completely overwhelming. And as it relates to trust, it was very important because, very interesting, when we were going to launch the product, there's a lot of debate about the name of the product. How do you relate it to the mother brand? How do you connect it? And we felt that the product was strong enough that we should go with a soft brand, which was KGC. And that was very, very critical to the success of the brand. Now, what we did is we basically, consumers got to QSR, they want a great tasting product. So we connected the fact that it tasted as good as our core product, but it had a healthier, dimension for it. So very, very successful. And again, it's 2020, and I got to tell you, one of the big learnings we had as we're going through our business plan is, in a moment of crisis, you got to invest and you got to keep driving your advertising, because when the crisis is over, you're going to be way ahead of the competition.
Now, you focused that launch on a promotion, a large promotion with Oprah, and it was interesting. We spoke, it was either the week before, or you said there was actually very high trial, but as I think probably people in the audience know, in the press, there was also criticism of the fact that some people couldn't get their chicken. So doing it again, would you do it that way? And just tell me about that experience of doing that Oprah promotion.
Sure, I mean, that was very exciting. For those of you that work with television, as you know, the way television works is you get a call and you're basically on the studio the week after. So what happened, I've been trying to call Oprah, the Oprah show to get in, and finally connected with somebody there from marketing, showed them the campaign. They got very excited about it. This is a Monday. They told me we'll be ready to be in the studio on Thursday of this week. So within 4 days, I had to mobilize 650 franchises, 5,200 restaurants, and look at what we could do. Now, when I told them, what's the most successful thing you ever done? They told me, well, we did the Kindle, where we gave a $75 coupon, and we gave away 1 million of them. And then Susie Orman gave a book, and that was 2 million. So we figured, well, maybe 3-4 million could be what we would do. But within 24 hours, we had 10 million coupons that had been downloaded in the internet.
Wow. Americans like chicken more than they like
they
books.
But it also talked to the crisis, right? I mean, you had people that were waiting for hours to get a meal that is basically $4. So after the second day, when I was driving to work the second day, I knew I could either be fired, I could be a hero, right? So I'm going to work, and we gave away 4 million meals in 2.5 days. So after that, we decided that we needed to change the promotion because people in the restaurant were not very happy. So we went out and we talked with the Oprah people. We said, we got to do a rain check. It's not a good customer, situation, neither for your customers or ours, and they were fantastic. I mean, they really, really take care of the Oprah brand, which is an incredible brand. And they actually had us go in the show for a second time. We explained the situation, and it turned out to be a very successful promotion. Now, the key thing is we were not able to tell people our results because our quarter earnings were not announced yet. So everybody started trashing, KFC, and you run out of chicken, etc. And once the release was out, then we could talk to people, and obviously it was a very, very successful promotion. Took our trial from 13% to 19% in only 4 weeks, which is pretty amazing, and it was an unbelievable investment.
Listening to things that both of you said, Marilyn, I want to ask you this question. I mean, here with Javier, you had in the press, the press is trashing KFC, but in fact, the silent majority of people are trying grilled chicken. It's actually a successful promotion. David, you have online, there are very vocal anti-Microsoft people, but like you said, your research showed that the silent majority really is a fan of Microsoft. So I'm curious, how do you balance thoughts about the loud, the bloggers and the press versus the perceptions of your actual customers, and how do you go about thinking about that and then making decisions depending on that?
Right. Well, for us, we think of it as inbound and outbound. So when I do something outbound, it's to create awareness largely for a new product. I mean, I can shout about us being in the networking business, but people kind of already get that. When we talk about a new product like we're in the server business, then it may not be as exciting as grilled chicken, but to our colleagues at Dell and IBM and HP, it was pretty exciting that all of a sudden Cisco was in the server business. So we first went and launched it really in the blog space, and in the space where technologists are talking about servers and talking about that kind of technology, and actually launched it in a very soft way with social media first, and then went the traditional route at a much later date. So inbound and outbound, we try to engage the 16 million people who are coming to Cisco.com every day. So they're the inbound people. They're the ones who, who are already aware of your product, are learning, wanting to look at more, wanting to learn more, so they're leading forward. And you want to give them a great experience when they come to your site. I think most marketers tend to focus on the outbound stuff. You know, what can we shout about? Versus the people who are already interested in your category, already talking about you, and then addressing, you know, what their experience is as they go forward.
Scott, how do you think about that at Audi?
Yeah, obviously the scale at Audi is significantly different, obviously, than Microsoft. You know, we sell 1 million units worldwide, and we do 80 to 90,000 units in the United States. So, you know, I think there is not this extremely loud and small. People make a lot of noise about Audi, but essentially what we do, obviously, is we have Audi Talk. We have all sorts of mechanisms to track things, and very simplistically, we get back to people. And most people in the automotive business who are very, very engaged are enthusiasts, and enthusiast makes perfect sense for Audi. We're an enthusiast brand, so traditionally it plays right into our favor. And you know, I think more the issue we have is obviously we have all sorts of exotic products that we have in Europe because we sell more units in Europe, and the usual stuff we get is enthusiasts who want to know why we're not bringing in RS6 Avants and all these types of products, and we play that to our advantage because again, it all comes from enthusiasm. Rarely does it come from a more cynical place. So.
I mean, what we're really talking about here is you know, social media, and it's and how do you think about? I mean, David, how does Microsoft play in social media?
Yeah, I think one thing to add on to your previous question that connects into this one is you have to be, it all comes down to how you think about your dashboard, right? How you think about the way you measure your brand and the effectiveness of any individual engagement that you do. If you spent all day looking at the sort of Twitch dials that you have for Facebook activity, Twitter posts, digs and dugs and everything else, you could really want to drive off of a cliff at the end of the day. Because you'd see, oh, there's this storm going on and people are attacking you for this or people are not, grooving on that. But you have to end up keeping that in perspective because what you have is a very small number of people, and we've all seen the numbers on who generates the bulk of the Twitter traffic and everything else. And you have a very small number of people who are very vocal and can whip each other into a frenzy within, what we always call the echo chamber. Now, the critical thing is to know when those people are actually really influencers to the broader concentric circles of customers that are out from there, and how to engage them. We've been very, very active as a company in social media engagement. We have, I think, over 10,000 bloggers at the company. We have official corporate Twitter accounts for virtually every sub-brand that we've got. We've, launched campaigns and product via Facebook and YouTube. And so we're very, very active in doing these things. We even crowdsourced the creative that we ran on TV for our I'm a PC campaign last fall, by inviting people to upload their own videos, and then we curated those and actually put them back on television in a closed loop. So we've really been very, very active at using it, but I think the key thing in all of it is use it because it's interactive and it's engaging and it allows you to have a conversation in a different way. Don't get distracted by the fact that you will have a bunch of haters saying really nasty things about you. They might be saying it to 5 other people that are like them. And if you overreact and take the wrong action there, you're just going to feed into their own sense of empowerment that they made you blink or drove you to the edge or got you to do something unnatural. So understanding the relationship between the very, very vocal minority and the more influenceable majority that are out there, that's really the key thing to knowing how to calibrate your dashboard.
Marilyn, how do you think about that? I see you nodding your head.
Well, it's the notion of the real-time web, and I see a lady over here who's videotaping me with a flip camera, so in about 9 seconds we could be all posted up on FlipShare and YouTube. So, that's just an example of real-time web, and so, if I say something inappropriate about one of my colleagues or my customers, I'll hear about it probably as soon as I step off the stage. So these trends in the web, the top ones, are about conversations, it's about personalization, it's about the real-time web. People could be twittering as we talk here, saying, boy, it's the stupidest panel I've ever heard. These people, why would I ever think that a panel is going to be interesting? All that plus the sense of structured data on the web today, the fact that you can link all these things together. It only takes one person who's passionate about a situation, and it could be an experience they have at a restaurant or a car dealer or whatever, and as they get passionate about it and more people join the conversation, you either join that conversation yourself in a very genuine way, or you're out of the conversation. And I'd rather be part of the conversation than not. It's sort of like, the cheerleader clique in high school. It was better that, you were with them and being talked with them rather than not being with them and being talked about.
But what does genuine mean here? I mean, and what is authentic, and how do you talk to them in a way that doesn't creep people out? I mean, on the one hand, you're just like everyone else. On the other hand, you have this dashboard, David, that's twitching and going off when anybody says anything. So what's the, any one of you, what's the authentic way to do that? How do you know you're...
I think what happens is most marketeers approach the social media the wrong way. They approach it the old way, which is, you want to brief an agency and you want to make sure you're there. That's never going to work. So I think back to what Marilyn was saying, although I cannot relate to the cheerleader, example.
You probably would have liked to.
You have to do things that are great and cool, and people will grab and run with them. And that's the way it works. I mean, you don't have control over that. I think Dave's point is good too. Don't worry if there's a small, group of people potentially are, kind of just talking among themselves. But I'll give you a great example. We launched a sandwich in a test market called the Double Down sandwich. We didn't plan to be on the web or anything like that. And, out of nowhere, suddenly this sandwich that was just tested in a couple of markets became top 10 in Yahoo search and so forth. And we didn't plan to do that. So I think when you approach it from a way where you're doing genuine marketing, you have some ideas that are more out there, the medium will pick them up. If you try to really get in there and brief it the way you did it the old school, it's never going to work.
Last social media question, that's for Scott. I mean, this panel's about trust and building authenticity. Do you think, is social media the best marketing medium for building trust? Is it useful as a marketing medium, period?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'll answer that question and maybe touch on the former topic a little bit. But I think obviously from the company, you get a lot of emails and requests from various people saying, why don't we make this a social media cause? Why don't we make this downloadable? Why don't we do this on Facebook? And you have to be absolutely pragmatic about this. The odds of going out there and making a social cause around this car costs this much money, or you can lease this car for this much, and expect it to become this, viral madness out there in the marketplace isn't going to happen. So I think you have to really take a look at it and say a traditional marketing message of there's a product and it costs this much and does this probably isn't going to be that effective. From our point of view, you have to try to pick these things going to be real, legitimate causes. And can something really be a cause? Because people are social around a cause, they care about causes, they have a point of view around them. And the best analogy we can give is obviously there's a tremendous amount of debate right now about what is going to power future cars. And is it going to be diesel? Is it going to be the continued combustion engine? Is it going to be electric cars? Is it going to be hybrids, plug-in hybrids, on and on? To us, that is a cause around a majority of people can get around. They have a point of view on it. So when we launched diesel, it wasn't diesel's great and it has a lot of torque, go buy it. It's diesel actually reduces fuel consumption in America by 30%. Reducing fuel consumption by 30% means we can stop importing oil from Saudi Arabia. Let's debate that, push that out into the marketplace. That creates conversation and gets people chatting and moving. So for us, we think we have to limit the amount of things as opposed to just bouncing every single marketing thing that we want to sell something isn't going to work. I think it has to have a point of view, it has to have a cause, it has to lead to a conversation. Then it'll work. So I think there's big advantages of that. I think the other thing about social media from our point of view, it's probably potentially going to work better as a customer service, customer relationship environment than just a pure marketing environment. If we had a message we wanted to send out about certain options or something about the functioning of a roof or something about our MMI system, we would have to go into our legacy system, search down addresses of dealers, find customers that moved 5 times. Very complicated to get message out to customers. If you have this platform where all Audi owners are, all TT owners are, all R8 V10 owners are, much easier to get in reach of them and do it. So we think it's more of a customer service relationship tools that heads to the future is purely just a static marketing environment. We want to sell something. So top line, that's what we think.
So let me ask you this. We're here at Advertising Week. Probably a lot of people in the crowd are from ad agencies or work at ad agencies. I'm curious, what sort of role are you looking, or what sorts of things are you looking for? What role do you want your ad agencies to play today that may be different from a year ago. It sounds like there's sort of new applications. I mean, customer service as on Twitter, for instance. Marilyn, what sorts of things are you looking for from your agency?
Well, I'm probably looking for, and I know our agency, Ogilvy, is launching a new campaign tomorrow with Yahoo and their new campaign. I'm looking forward to seeing what that's all about. I think Wall Street Journal launched a little bit of it this morning. So, it's kind of out in the blogosphere. But I think I'm looking for, a relationship that intersects between two things. There's the ideals of your brand and what your brand stands for, and then there's what's happening in society. And if you can find the sweet spot between those two things, then you can connect with people in a real way. If you can also connect with people in an emotional way, it's much more compelling to people than it is just to, throw information out there. And if you can also connect with them in a compelling, emotional way, and also with humor, it takes some of the lightness out of this economic downturn.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm looking for.
What role does humor play today? Everyone says, it's about price, about value. What sorts of role do you see with just entertainment?
Sure. I mean, I think the humor, and we do a lot of ads. Hopefully, many of them are intentionally funny. And, I think the key thing is the humor has to be used to establish relevance and resonance with the consumer. We're all very familiar with lots of ads that are very, very funny and yet really fail when it comes to actual message delivery or, landing a sustainable sort of positioning idea about a brand. And so our perspective is, the humor's there. When it's used effectively, it's used to establish, to get the head nodding, to get that frame of reference, to say you've been there, you've had this experience yourself. In the Bing ads where we sort of exaggerate the experience of getting lost in the infinite links that you get from other search engines, and you see people babbling about one topic or another, that, the reason we know that humor works is you see people's heads nod and they go, God, I have had that experience when I searched, when I started looking for one thing and I just sort of meandered off course and ended up over here. So if the humor works well, if it gets the head nodding, puts the customer in a frame of mind where they're open to a story about how you provide a different sort of a solution to a problem that they have. I think we've all seen those situations there where the humor is there for its own sake, where it's chasing that sort of viral, gold star without actually understanding the kind of message and the kind of positioning you're going for. So humor to us is just one of a number of emotional tools, as you said, that can activate a specific insight about a customer and start the dialogue with them.
Sure. I want to open it up to audience questions.
But I was just curious, I noticed I'm a student at New York University, and every year when a new student comes in, everyone's getting Apple computers and everything. And I was just curious in that specific market, what Microsoft's doing to invest in, making students feel that, Microsoft's also a sexy brand to buy for school.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting challenges that we've got is dealing with the student population in general, because there are two components to it. I mean, one is obviously there's our operating system, which is a component inside, a PC that somebody else makes. And so really we have to work with the OEMs to help support their programs to get into campus bookstores and co-ops and all the other sorts of things. The one thing that is working in our advantage, obviously, is that students have less disposable income than they might typically, and students tend to be a little cash-strapped in general. And the bargains that are available in the PC universe are sort of staggering at this point, what folks are giving away. And so that sort of macro trend is one that we've been highlighting in our Marcom to make sure everybody's aware of during back-to-school season. But we have an entire team that's dedicated to doing nothing but .edu engagements, to making sure that they're in those venues and doing it. The other thing I would say is we use our other brands and communications that have a higher natural degree of relevance to that audience. Xbox is a good example, right? So if Xbox is a brand that has a high degree of relevance and engagement, we try to make sure that folks know in the context of Xbox, there's a bunch of things you can do if you have one, if you also have a PC to hook the two of them together in terms of high-def movie rentals or whatnot. So it's a topic we're very, very focused on, not surprisingly.
So right up there.
How do you get from a strong level of brand awareness for the Cisco brand or for any individual line of products to an actual sale that happens through a third party?
Right. Well, it would be a big shock to our sales force if they heard that the lion's share of our products is sold through through resellers. I think the lion's share of our products are actually kind of sold through retailers and then processed through partners and through the web. But having said that, our resellers are as much a deliverable of our brand as our salespeople. So every touch point that your brand has is either going to be a positive deposit into the brand bank and a negative one. I think oftentimes, especially technology companies, we underestimate the reseller market. And the fact that they represent, many of us, they could represent Hewlett-Packard and Microsoft and IBM. And so, our brand experience is in the hands of people who get to choose all the time. So really spending time and engaging them and showing what's in it for them aside from just spiffs, but really getting them to understand the unique selling proposition and making technology simple. What do you say in a minute that differentiates you from the other guy? That's what's really missing, I think, in a lot of technology marketing. And I'd just like to make another comment on the social media aspect. I think at the end of the day, you want to create a brand that people root for. When I was at IBM, we used to watch scores for arrogance amongst technology companies. And over time, we were happy to see that the scores for IBM were slightly diminishing over time, and one of our partners' scores for arrogance was climbing.
Which was that, Microsoft?
I won't be saying who the other
I've tracked that one too.
company
It's
was,
on the
but
way.
Yeah, how is that doing?
But
Steadily decreasing.
we're great partners and competitors in many ways. But when times get tough, brands that you root for will come back when times are tough. When times get tough and people don't root for your company or root for your brand, they can't wait to see you fall. So, a lot of people move to Bing very quickly because they want to see an alternative. They'll move to try out the new Yahoo portal because they want to, I think they in essence root for Yahoo and they want to see them turn around and do better again. So that's kind of the center of what we're trying to do is, when times are great, you want a brand that stands out and has positive attributes, but when times get bad, you want to be trusted and you want to be somebody a brand that people will root for over time.